really wanted to elevate the non-alc experience to the same level of the world's best traditional spirits and cocktails. And so that was a big goal with us, with Lynette, as we were developing the product. These aren't proxy spirits. So you see some brands out there that are creating non-alc gins, tequilas, vodkas, things like that. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to leverage the craft and expertise and history and heritage of great cocktail making to create something new, because we view the bar of the future as, 5-10 years from now, going into a bar and really having maybe 20-25% of the options being non-alc. We also wanted people to build brand equity in the liquid flavor so that over time people understood, oh, that's Aplós, not like, oh, that could be a gin, but really understand and recognize our flavor profiles.
Hello and welcome to the Startup CPG podcast, e-commerce edition, and gearing up for dry January. So today we have David Fudge, who is the co-founder and CEO of Aplós, which is a modern beverage brand setting out to reimagine the adult drinking occasion for the new generation of wellness-minded consumers. David has incredible marketing experience. He was the director of marketing at Bonobos during some of those huge growth years. And on this episode, we talked about his approach to branding and how that paid off big time when consumers' interest in non-alc caught up to where his product was, and also how he launched his brand with a focus on the unexpected niche market of New York fashion influencers. We also go into detail on his preferred e-com strategies and recommendations for new brands that he learned from Bonobos and refined over the course of his career to really blast off with Aplós. I think you are going to absolutely love this episode and be taking notes along the way. Enjoy! David, my friend, welcome to the podcast. Aplós is such an amazing brand. What made you the perfect guy to start this kind of a company?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate to be a part of two startups since 2010, the first one being Bonobos. Andy, the founder there, gave me the opportunity to lead brand there. And then I moved to Miami and was CMO of a travel startup, and that sold. Both businesses sold. Really gave me the itch to create something myself. And I've always been, as my co-founder calls me, a reluctant drinker. And so it was that curiosity that led me to really imagine, is there an opportunity for me to create something that gives me everything I love about the cocktail experience, but take out the negative health effects?
Okay, and so for me, I look at Bonobos as the OG of digitally native brands, one of the very early ones that was out there, online first strategy, killing it on ads. Even like I had a friend who was just running his own Craigslist ads with his referral code so he could bank up a bunch of money and just, creating a lot of awareness that way. You must have learned a ton there that really gave you the blueprint for how to do something like this.
Yeah, I think from a mindset perspective, absolutely. I mean, it was a very different time. Like, it's a lot of times these startups, it is about timing, right? It's about taking advantage of the opportunity. And at the time, there weren't a lot of brands that, well, first of all, Bonobos was, I believe, the first fashion brand built on the internet. Andy used to love to say that because people would call him crazy when that he said that he wanted to improve the shopping experience for men and make it easier for them. But I think it was also just the time, like Facebook advertising was just starting at the time. And email marketing was very not sophisticated as well. And so it's sort of the fundamental building blocks of an e-commerce business hadn't really been flushed out yet. And it was an opportunity. We were working with a ton of really smart people, and we took advantage of a lot of those opportunities early on. So we were one of the first brands to advertise on Facebook, and you would see the numbers immediately every single day and see the growth. And we were, in many ways, like rebels trying a lot of, we weren't afraid to try anything. And a lot of the men's fashion brands out there at the time were not focused on e-commerce at all. Their websites were bad experiences, and they didn't really take us seriously, and was kind of a recipe for the magic of how successful Bonobos ended up being.
I love to hear that. One of my most interesting and favorite friends from business school when I graduated in 2009 went to Bonobos, Craig Elbert. And just of all the people in my class was really just somebody I think you might put in that category of like, rebel, but not in a like bad behavior way, and just a like really free, creative thinker, one of the funniest people on the planet, I think. It was so interesting that he was going there. I think it was 2009, like mid-recession, people were doing different kind of jobs, but that was, not the world of startups that we saw kind of afterwards. So, I mean, are there a lot of interesting people like you and him there? Was it more like, corporate culture, or what was it like?
It's so funny. I don't know if we spoke about this, but Craig was my boss there. So a friend of mine that I'd met when I was at Esquire brought me over to Bonobos. I didn't think I was interviewing at the time, but I got to meet Andy and they offered me a job pretty much immediately. He ended up leaving within, I think, 6 or 8 months. And then Andy split up brand and performance marketing, and Craig had like a finance background. And I think at the time was the finance director, and he made Craig the head of marketing, and he oversaw performance, and I reported to him and oversaw brand. But yeah, I think there's 4 or 5 of us from that time at Bonobos that have gone on to start CPG brands, which is funny that we went from apparel to CPG, but I guess it just worked out that way.
Yeah, and then Craig, who then started Care of, which then he sold to J&J, although I think he's still there. But that's what I would assume is like, from such a pioneering brand like that, that a lot of the people who made that happen really learned it and went and applied it a bunch of other places. So, which brings us to Aplós. So take me through a little tasting here. I'm very well set up here in my studio. I've got some lovely bottles of Aplós right here. I've got the Calm, I've got the Ease, and then I also have the RTDs here, which are very beautiful. So I've got my Mandora Negroni, I've got the Ume Spritz, I've got the Cola Fashioned as well. I don't have the chili one with me because I am a wuss and I don't like spicy stuff. But take me through some of the other stuff, what the experience is going to be like for somebody drinking these.
Yeah, sure. So our vision with Aplos is to really build the bar of the future and to create functional, non-alcoholic spirits and cocktails that give you everything you like about the drinking experience, but take out the hangover. And so they're better for you. The spirits are very low in calorie. There's no sugar. The cocktails are made with our spirits. And we have sort of 2 lanes of spirits and cocktails. And the reason behind that is because we drink really for 2 main reasons. We're either stressed or we want to have fun. And so we have functional packs that map to those main occasions of why we drink and when we drink. So Aplos Calm and Ease are for that relax and unwind occasion. And Aplos Arise is for that social kind of upper occasion. Now, I will take a step back and say I don't come from a beverage background. And my co-founder, Emily, we actually met at Bonobos. She doesn't either. And so we knew that the product had to come first, and we had to have a great product. And so we interviewed dozens of people in the drinks industry, mixologists, and we ended up bringing on someone named Lynette Marrero, who did the masterclass for mixology. She created Speed Rack, which is the world's largest female-only bartending competition. James Beard honoree, really well respected in the industry, to serve as our liquid creative director and master mixologist. And so we wanted something that could stand up as a lead spirit in a cocktail, have that same depth and complexity and nuance you would get from a traditional spirit, and the versatility where you could make an infinite number of cocktails. And so we have those 2 lanes of spirits. And then this year we started launching ready to drink cocktails, which are crafted with our spirits. And that's where Lynette really shines. She spent decades behind the bar and building bar programs for some of the best restaurants and bars in the world. And so we've had a lot of fun with that. We've launched 4 this year.
That is amazing. I know Lynette. She is a pro. She literally does the master class for spirits as well. If you know that like app master class, if you want to go in there and learn about spirits, you can spend some time with her on there. And I know she's done tons of really epic projects, right? Like the one with J-Lo. But yeah, she was on a program that I did called Reality Israel with a bunch of really epic food and beverage people. So I got to spend some time with her there. I definitely am familiar with her skill set. So that's awesome. Okay, so you've started with the spirit, right, which comes in these very cool craft bottles. and then subsequently went into RTDs using the spirit and then other stuff in here. And can you just tell me a little bit about what the experience should be like for people? Like I noticed on the bottle, for example, it seems honestly like it's handwritten, like the batch number and bottle number on every one of these. The bottle is just like very deluxe, but it has a really substantial feel where if I feel like if I were in a like Harry Potter type pub, there would be like a kind of bottle in there, but updated to also be pretty modern. But it just feels like what I'm about to drink is extremely craft. Is that kind of is that in line, or what do you hope people experience with the spirit line?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think one of the big insights for creating Aplos was, I was in New York for 11 years, and it's very common after work or on the weekend to just stumble into a great bar and get a cocktail. And I always viewed it as a small luxury, right? Where the experience of sitting down, ordering something and someone making it in front of you, and the craft and care that goes into that, but also the presentation of the glass and the garnish. And when I would ask for something non-alc, I would always either get an eye roll, an offer of a sugary, quote unquote, mocktail, a soda. And so it felt like there was an opportunity for people who maybe don't want to drink in certain occasions for whatever reason. Why can't they be a part of this experience? And so we really wanted to elevate the non-alc experience to the same level of the world's best traditional spirits and cocktails. And so that was a big goal with us, with Lynette, as we were developing the product. The other thing I will say is these aren't proxy spirits. So you see some brands out there that are creating non-alc gins, tequilas, vodkas, things like that. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to leverage the craft and expertise and history and heritage of great cocktail making to create something new, because we view the bar of the future as, 5-10 years from now, going into a bar and really having maybe 20-25% of the options being non-alc. We also wanted people to build brand equity in the liquid flavor so that over time people understood, oh, that's Aplos, not like, oh, that could be a gin, but really understand and recognize our flavor profiles. Now, it's very difficult to create a spirit when you're not doing a proxy and you want it to have the versatility, the complexity, the length, the bite, that cooling after effect that you get from a traditional spirit. It's very nuanced how to build, how the flavors build in a cocktail and how it has some length to it and sophistication. It took us, I think, over 60 iterations for the first product. It took us about a year and a half to get to a point where we felt confident. We only launched with one SKU. We've added 2 other spirits, but we've been around since late 2020, really early 2021. And so we designed these spirits so they felt familiar but new. So you drink them just like you would any traditional spirit. So you can drink them neat on the rocks or mix them in an infinite number of cocktails. It's roughly a shot size, so 2 ounces is our suggested serve. And we wanted it, like I said, to feel familiar so that people weren't having to learn a different experience to enjoy these products. Now, the relax and unwind products, ease and calm, or more herbaceous, they are more gin-like. Whereas a rise has agave, lemon verbena, and a black Sarawak pepper. So it's more savory. It's more tequila-like. But again, they're not proxies. And so, that was our approach of building the spirits to create something familiar but unique and create something that wasn't reinventing how you create a cocktail.
So you were largely ahead of the huge shift that we've seen in non-alc behavior from consumers. I think you could look back and say, okay, there was Seedlip, obviously, that had a pretty big exit and created a lot of the appetite from, let's say, big beverage companies for stuff that could be non-alc, but still have a pretty high price point and still appeal to consumers, and have really high level marketing on it also. But you couldn't possibly have predicted what was going to happen in the last couple years, which is just hordes and hordes of consumers deciding, hey, I'm going to drink less, right? And, especially the younger generation, a lot of them just not drinking at all. And plenty of my friends, and, if I have a party in LA, literally half of the people are not going to be drinking at it, and I have to make sure I have tons of non-alc options for all of them to be happy because they still want to have fun. So how do you see it evolving now? And what's it like for that to catch up to you where you've been developing these products waiting for them?
Yeah. I mean, I still think we're in early innings, right? If you look at a lot of the major retailers and honestly, a lot of the bars and restaurant hospitality groups, hotel groups, nationally and internationally, the UK is still ahead of the US, even though it's much, much smaller in terms of the size of the non-alc market. So we still are in early innings. I think you and I know a lot about it because we're in the industry, right? Or in the CPG industry. And so what we're seeing now is next year, a lot of the national retailers are really maturing their sets in the NA category, which again, to pull back, is segmented just like traditional alcohol. So beer, wine, and spirits. And then the emerging category of RTD cocktails, which is also very fast growing on the alcohol side. And so, I think as more products start to show up on shelves in retailers and on menus in bars and restaurants, and it becomes table stakes, it's just going to be continued to snowball, right? And so I think that we're continuing to head down a path, which I view as really sort of the next phase of this 15, 20-year macro wellness trend that has hit every single category. I mean, it's hit fashion with the rise of athleisure. It's hit all the major food categories and beverage categories as well. And so I really think in the next year to 18 months, you're going to start to see non-alc much more on menus, and you're going to see more mature shelf sets at retail that are specifically defined and segmented within the category for beer, wine, and spirits.
I agree with you 100%. I think I also probably am a little bit biased, or I feel it more than everybody else because I lived in California up until 4 months ago. And over indexes hugely on people who don't drink, who go do ice plunges instead of going to bars and like sound baths, And I definitely see it there. But I mean, it's going to come everywhere, especially just the high percentage of Gen Z that we see not drinking as much. So then another question I have for you, which is, okay, that generation, they go to a party and they're not going to drink. They're looking for what they want to drink that isn't alcoholic. Let's say there are options you have, like, your kind of spirits and RTDs. And then you also have other things that aren't alcoholic, but aren't marketed as, let's say, alternatives. You have like poppy soda, you have a juice. What's going to make them pick something like a spirit, like a non-alc spirit, over another drink that might be flavorful or just a sparkling water or something like that? How do they make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it is about where it's merchandised and where it's placed on a menu, right? And I think that the consumer is ahead of a lot of the buyers across both on and off premise. And so, you see some grocery stores, some retail chains where Olipop is merchandised on the same shelf as some of the non-alc RTDs, which is confusing for customers. It's really important that customers understand where and how you fit in their lives. And so we always advocate in retail to be merchandised next to the traditional spirits with our spirits, and to be merchandised next to the alcoholic RTD cocktails with our cocktails. So I want to sit next to the Kettle One and soda at Whole Foods. I don't want to sit next to, no offense to Poppy and Olipop, because it's a different occasion. And when someone is going into a retail store and buying something for a nice meal, they're looking for a great bottle of wine or a great spirit, or wanting to take a gift to a friend's house. It's really important where you sit in the store. And then similarly on menus, you see some bar directors and national hospitality groups, hotel groups, unsure where to put non-alc cocktails on the menu. We actually advocate putting them in a traditional cocktail menu, and similar to how you see gluten-free or dairy-free sort of noted on the menu, to actually note the ABV of the cocktail. Now, we're not there yet, and that's a little bit more of a challenging thing, but we're happy to at least be in a non-alc cocktail section. But often, some of our, for example, RTD cocktails have been merchandised alongside sodas, which we think is confusing for the customer. But these things are starting to change, and you're seeing a lot of these national groups really rethink not only the retail sets, but also you're seeing a lot of calls and RFPs for national hospitality groups and hotel chains that are starting to build their programs around NA.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I remember being in an Erewhon when I was demoing right next to the front cooler beverage set. And this was, I don't know, 2 years ago or something. And just watching a woman come up, and they had Little Saints on the cooler there, and she just cleared like 20 of them off into her cart. I just was, because I know the brand, and they actually used to be across the street from us in Santa Monica, and I was just like looking at her doing this, like, where are you going with all those Little Saints? Like, what's going on? I'm like, okay, she's going to a party, or she's having a party. And so it's like a party. And so she's stocked up with these non-alc cocktail mixers, rather than like, yeah, I mean, a poppy might fulfill that occasion, but you're probably not going to roll into a party where you want to bring something with you to contribute to the party with just something like a poppy, right? You're probably much more likely to bring something that has a festive flair to it, or the functional, something like that, where, like it says on the back of your can, liberate yourself from usefulness, with with this lovely Aplós Ume spritz. So, just something that feels a little bit more special.
Yeah, it's typically drinking a cocktail is a more ceremonious occasion. Or, you think about often that relaxing wine occasion during the week when people want a glass of wine is that sort of transition from work to play. But when you're going to a friend's place, you want something that feels a little bit more special. And so there are fewer of the occasions than there are the soda occasion. But yeah, I mean, I think that the intention is to elevate the experience and to give people a sophisticated option that isn't just a Diet Coke.
Okay, so that all makes sense to me. But David, I brought you here because I wanted to pick your brain on e-com strategy. So let's get into it, man. Let's do it. Let's unpack all of the good stuff, because even so, let's say early days you just had the one SKU, but I know you were doing good business with just that one SKU, even without people getting to try it in tons of demos in stores. Like, you knew how to do this just from day one. So can you just talk me through your e-com strategy? How did you blast off and already have a really effective machine to acquire consumers and, ship expensive product places, but still be making money doing that and growing your brand, even as you evolved the SKU portfolio and all that?
Yeah. Well, I think the benefit of the launching with the spirit, aside from being a big part of our strategy of wanting to elevate the cocktail occasion and non-alc, was we could be a lower volume, higher margin business. And it is a challenging channel for ready to drink because it's just sort of the logistics and the how heavy liquid is, right? And how much it costs to ship something relative to what people expect to pay for it, right? And so, but I love e-com, and we always wanted to launch in e-com and direct to consumer because you can control the experience more. I'm in a category where the incumbents can't have direct relationships with their consumers because of the 3-tier system in the US. So for those of you who don't know, that alcohol brands have to go through bev out distributors. And in some states, there could be a 4th tier. They can't sell directly to the consumer. And so I love e-com because it gives you direct access to the consumer. It's really easier for me, at least, to test product market fit. And that first year for us was about really understanding the core unit economics of the business. Like, what does it cost us to acquire a customer? What's the repeat rate? What's the average order value? Like, is there product market fit? And, I think we also wanted to control the experience of our site and what our brand looked like. That was a big part of it as well. But even though I learned so much at Bonobos, the thing about e-com is, what worked yesterday doesn't work tomorrow. And so it's really about having the right mindset, because I could give you some tips today that are going to be irrelevant in a couple of months. And that's just the nature of how fast this industry works. And also, quite frankly, how fast a lot of the major advertising platforms change their algorithms to optimize, like Google and Meta, and TikTok. So, I think you have to be really entrepreneurial and scrappy and curious and move quickly when you want to launch something in e-com, because like I said, what works yesterday won't work tomorrow.
Okay, so if those tips are going to become irrelevant, then you don't have to worry about your competitors hearing them on here and stealing them. So can you just give me a couple examples of what some of those tips are, things that you have learned recently that have really helped you be effective on e-commerce?
Yeah. I think for us, like really taking the time to really solidify our brand strategy up front. Like we're not competing on price convenience, we're competing on desirability, right? And the quality of our product. So, we really took the time to invest in the brand and the experience and the packaging, and the liquid, obviously. And so that is number one. Like if your product isn't great, then, it's a non-starter. Um, I think the other big thing that we did that I would advise anyone to do even today is pick a niche and go really deep in a niche. I think you can't be all things to all people. If everyone likes you, nobody loves you, right? And so I'd rather have 10,000 crazy fans than 100,000 or a million that buy from me once and never come back. And so you have to have a point of view, particularly in the media environment we're in today. You have to get people's attention and have a strong point of view. And it's important that you sort of have that strong sense of self early on. But more than that, when we did our influencer seeding at the start, we picked a niche of consumer and we over-indexed in influencers in that niche. And the reason we did that is because we had a big background, my co-founder and I, in fashion. And so we really over-indexed in New York fashion community people. And the reason we did that is because the person that's following, a guy named Patrick in New York is likely following 6 to 10 other people in that niche. And so people see it multiple times and they assume it's bigger than it is. And the frequency is really important. And you have to be really efficient early on. And so it almost doesn't even matter what the niche is. I mean, obviously it needs to align with your brand and your product, but like really picking a niche and going hard versus like I've chatted with a few other founders before they've launched and they're like, I'm getting, gifting 50 people in fitness and 50 people here and 50 people there. And I'm like, that is going to be less effective in my opinion, because you want to saturate one market versus in one consumer cohort versus trying to spray and pray and reach everyone. It's just not going to work when you have a limited budget and limited resources.
We'll be right back.
Hey folks, are you ready to boost your e-commerce sales and profitability? When I ran a brand, the hardest pill to swallow was money wasted on a bad performance marketing strategy. Meet the team from Pennick Digital Marketing. They're strategists, media planners, and SEO experts who can't stand seeing emerging brands struggle with inefficient marketing spend. They create tailored solutions for brands who generate over $25,000 in monthly e-commerce revenue to help them achieve profitable growth. But wait, there's more! Pennick is offering qualifying Startup CPG brands a special deal, either $15,000 in ad spend or a full quarter of SEO services. To see if you qualify, head over to pennick.co/startupcpg. That's PENNOCK.co/startupcpg. It's in the show notes.
And now, back to the show.
That is very interesting. So really concentrating a lot of your marketing efforts around one niche, and it might be something unexpected as well, but just that really plays to the strengths of the founders, right? And then just going for a penetration strategy there to then start building that core group of people who are going to know your brand well, talk about it as if it were already a big brand, not some scrappy upstart from some really strong entrepreneurs, but like, no, this thing is big, everybody's doing it. And create interest then from that way to, come and order from you directly. So Tell me a little bit more about the branding, because that's, like you are definitely a brand guy, and this is a very advanced brand. I would say, if I look at this compared to most beverage type startups, I would say this is a very sophisticated brand, and it always was on day one. Even though you've evolved the liquid inside, the branding was always just extremely strong. So how did you create the branding, and how were you thinking about the branding specifically for an e-com strategy?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is putting a stake in the ground and have personal taste, right? So we always wanted Aplos to feel like if a fashion brand made a spirit. I really love brands that make you dream, that show more than tell. And, for a long time, there was a very overt kind of, I would say almost like business school-y approach to introducing a brand where it was like, I had this problem and like, I went to solve it. Very founder driven brands. We intentionally didn't want the brand to be founder driven from the start. We wanted it to feel really aspirational. And we also wanted to do something that felt really different than traditional quote unquote spirit advertising. So if you look at brands like Grey Goose or Kettle One, any of those traditional sort of luxury spirit brands, can be somewhat formulaic in the creative. And so we wanted something that felt interesting and more immersive and kind of, like I said, shows more than tells. And so we worked early on, like we spoke to a few people about building the brand, and we worked with this woman, Sarah Kissel, who has a small agency in LA named Pure Magenta. And she just has an incredible taste level, but also a lot of experience in building brands and sort of the DNA behind the brands. We also brought in a strategist, woman who helped build the Aesop brand and was there for many, many years in-house. And so we invested in building the brand strategy from the start. I think a lot of people overlook that. And I, in my career, have had challenges in that regard with other founders where they don't understand the value of brand. And many people think it's the logo and the colors and the imagery. It's much more than that. I think of brands as multidimensional as people, right? Like you have a certain tone of voice, you have a look to you, you have certain values. And if you don't really know those things up front, then if you're doing things as you go, people inherently sense whether or not something is authentic or not. And people will perceive that like, hey, these things all don't go together. And it's because maybe it hasn't been thought out of, the full kind of breadth of the brand. But our intention was to launch Aplos and it not feel overly trendy, for it to feel like something that could stand the test of time and felt modern, but also, not too sort of at the time, like very sort of millennial, right? We've gone beyond that now, but something that felt like, oh, this is like a real mature brand if you came to our site, not something that's like a tiny little startup. That was our intention.
So looking at your Instagram and some of the visuals that you guys have, that makes sense to me because, it's not like so product forward. It's more like, here is how Aplos fits into the life of an interesting person who has very good taste and interesting friends.
Well,
What do you think?
that's very kind of you to say. I think we want Aplos to, like I said, elevate the experience of having something non-alcoholic. And, visually, it is a brand. Aplos is a Greek word. It means simple. And our brand is really about an appreciation of celebrating the simple things in life, which we think are the things that often bring the most substance to our lives. And so in a world that is sort of obsessed with optimization and being constantly connected, we wanted Aplos to be a brand that was about, appreciating those simple things, doing things with your hands, getting offline, creating products that help people connect. And so that's what we try and communicate and evoke with our communications, both visually and with content and copy.
Okay, that's cool. And now I can see, because yeah, I'm just looking through the Instagram and I can see how that explains a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing here. There's like a analog clock with some chess pieces on top, right? And then there's an old rotary phone that's like designed forward, but it's a rotary phone. And then somebody winding a watch, a charcuterie board, and very simple, like you're saying, type imagery. And then you have Aplos in them, but not in an in your face kind of way. But the whole thing, yeah, even when you have like the people who seem kind of like cool and interesting, but they're doing simple things, they're just kind of like enjoying themselves and their friends, or just, taking kind of creative experiences. So that makes sense. Like, thank you for explaining that to me. Now I understand why the Instagram looks this way.
Yeah, of course. Some of that content you're referencing is our teaser content for our Negroni that just launched. And so the campaign we actually shot our full collection this fall. We'll begin rolling out. And what we tried to do with that shoot was we called it a collection of curiosities. And the idea was to represent different types of personas and people with each different product. And the idea was often the things that bring us joy are little memories and like objects that we collect over time. And so each product was meant to be representative of a diverse set of personalities. And so that Negroni was more of a writer, kind of, I forget the exact, I think Joan Didion might have been the inspiration for it, but that was kind of where that came from.
That's cool. Well, I encourage anybody to check them out on Instagram at aplos.world. It's very cool. And you'll see what I'm talking about here. And you could tell me if you see what I see, or you see something very different if you know more about this than I do, which is not hard. Okay, so getting back to just some more specific e-com strategy, like what would you tell some brands then today? Like, hey, I'm starting, I feel like I have a good brand and I want to hit e-com pretty hard. Like, what's some of the highest ROI stuff I can do in addition to some of this, let's say niche influencer seeding strategy?
Yeah, I mean, the gifting really does show a return. So that is something I would definitely invest in. I mean, there's the sort of basic building blocks of e-commerce that most people know, right? So Shopify, Klaviyo, you want an SMS platform, you want a reviews platform, a lot of those kind of things I think of as like basic building blocks. I think you can't overestimate the power of creative in ads. And so you really need to be testing a lot of different things, and it has to be creative that's optimized for the platform, and it's constantly evolving, right? So something that works on TikTok is not going to necessarily work on another channel. And so the one thing I would encourage anyone that's interested in e-com or starting a business now is really about sort of being super curious about AI products, because there's so many coming out every single day. Specific to creative, there's a new tool called Butter that allows you to really pretty seamlessly create like dozens and dozens of iterations of creative for testing with your assets in a much more seamless way than it would have just taken, days and days and days of time before. But also just these generative models and using them as thought partners. I don't think you can think of them as replacing people on your team, but as an idea generator and thought partners. They're really powerful. And so I really think this is, obviously, as everyone is talking about in technology, the next wave. But the ad tech tools that are coming out that are AI enabled, the customer service tools that are coming out, are all super interesting. And there's one every week, if not every day, that comes out. And so I think 2025 is going to be where some of them really break out and become really powerful tools. But in that sense, I think it's a really exciting time, and could be a time like early bonobos where, it was the beginning of something that nobody else was really using yet. And so you have to be really curious and like looking into that stuff every single day to find the next gem. I mean, TikTok has been that as well for a while. I mean, we'll see if it gets banned actually, but it's still like producing incredible results for people. And most people are not doing TikTok ads effectively yet.
Yeah, that's totally true. Getting back to just that gifting point, one thing, let me ask you this kind of candidly. Like anyone who doesn't know David, David is a lovely guy. He's the kind of guy who people would want to do nice things for. If you like are gifting to your friends in the fashion world, it doesn't surprise me at all that they would be like, let's help David. He's a great dude, very likable guy. Let's, support him. Do you feel like that strategy is going to work similarly for most founders if they have a good outreach strategy? Or do you think it requires a kind of relationships that you've built over time for people to be like, yeah, I'm going to like use my resources and help this guy?
I think early on, it was maybe a couple dozen people that I knew directly that would, sure, help us out. But now, I think building the foundation of the brand and having, people, Instagram is a point of discovery for a lot of people. So they often go to your Instagram before they go to your website or your TikTok or something like that. And so making sure that you have a presence there that feels fully representative of your brand. And honestly, we were gifting for Dry January hundreds of people. And it really is just us DMing people saying, hey, we'd like to send you something. Are you interested? And they say yes or no. And we get their address and we send it to them. And we send them a nice package and we handwrite a note. And it's not as overly produced as you probably think it is. And I don't know 99% of the people that we're gifting personally. So yeah, I think that, it just takes DMing someone and saying, hey, I'm doing this thing. Are you, would you be interested if I send you something? And I think you can't put a lot of pressure on them posting it, right? Like we assume like 30 to 35% of people are actually going to post it. We don't write on the note like, hey, can you post this? Because we wanted to feel authentic. If people like the product, then they will share it. Or if they like what we send them, right? We often send them little gifts or something that feels a little bit more special. And so you do need to think outside of the box because these content creators are getting, hundreds of things every month. And so early on, I definitely leveraged some relationships, but even to this day, like we're constantly DMing people being like, hey, we like your vibe. We like what you're doing. Like, do you mind if we send you something? And we got a lot of no's. People only see the positive stuff, but we get hundreds, if not thousands of people who just don't respond to us or explicitly say no. And I think that's part of entrepreneurship. You have to put yourself out there and, it's constantly pitching things and getting a lot of rejections and being okay with that and learning from it, moving on.
That is very true. And I also wonder if there's something just about how nice the package is that's going to come because, I got a sample set here and it's just very nice. You're like, whoa, this is a very high value thing that they've sent me. And, if let's say, okay, yeah, some people are going to say no because they're like, no, I just do things like I get paid to do this for a living. You're not just going to send me something that means, you should be offering to pay me already for something, even though you don't know me. But if you send them something this nice, it makes me think, cause like, yeah, if I start like a chips brand and I send an influencer a couple of bags of chips, I would bet that they are less likely to post about it than if I send them something that just seems like a super nice gift with these beautiful bottles, thoughtfully done with a postcard. So it doesn't surprise me that you would get a pretty good percentage of them sharing, even people who have pretty sizable followings. And obviously you guys go out of your way to make sure it's special and, little gifts and stuff like that. I bet it's a pretty high return for you.
We'll be right back. Hola, amigos. About 4 years ago, I got a message from a designer in Colombia who said she'd like to work with Startup CPG to build her reputation in the US. I couldn't believe how affordable her pricing was, and the quality looked top-notch. I started work with them for Startup CPG and then a bunch of my other CPG projects as well. Fast forward to today, they are the most beloved agency in our Startup CPG community. They've got dozens of happy customers like Prickly and so many more. I recommend them to absolutely anybody who will listen because the combo of top-notch quality and very reasonable pricing is exactly what you want as a startup brand. You can hire them for branding, packaging, your website, or they actually have an awesome startup package that will do all three. If you want to learn more, email them at startupcpg at wagondesignstudio.com or check the show notes. You could also post on our Slack for feedback and just be overwhelmed by how many people want to sing their praises. Gracias, Wagon! And now, back to the show.
So, okay. Now we've talked about some of your high ROI tactics, but I'm sure you've made some mistakes here or at Bonobos or wherever. So what are some low ROI tactics that you learned from? Like, well, that didn't work. I wish we had that one back.
Yeah.
Anything that you can cite?
Yeah, there's a few things. So we did earlier this year a subscription quiz, kind of inspired by Noom. I don't know if you know Noom, where we thought that it would sort of increase our lead generation for subscription, and we definitely learned a bunch of things and are optimizing it, but that was a fairly low ROI initially. And I also think getting into channels before you're ready. So we tested in 2023 connected TV. And I think if you don't have the right creative and you're not setting up the test properly, it's just frankly a waste of time and waste of money. And so those are a couple of things that initially come to mind. Yeah. And then I think you try a lot of IRL stuff as a brand like ours, as I'm sure you know, because it is about getting people to try the product, right? And I think that is harder to measure the ROI sometimes. And so I think we used to do some sponsorship opportunities. We really don't do that anymore. We gift product when we feel like it's a brand relevant event or occasion. But often we find that the ROI isn't there when, I'm sure you've seen, because you've helmed a beverage brand yourself, like opportunities to sponsor things and they charge you sizable amounts of money. And then it's really just to offset their costs and you're not necessarily getting an ROI from it.
And they look cool because they have cool product there. And for anybody who's wondering, we do let people in the Startup CPG channel offer opportunities for beverages to sample, but not if they are paid. So just something that we try to do to help everybody out there because, there are a lot of people who would love for beverages to pay to be the cool ones giving out free product for your event. We don't really love to see that. So, okay. So that's cool to know. And can you just tell me a little bit more about the connected TV? So that was you running ads through some of the like TV ad platforms looking for specific audiences and you just felt like you didn't have the right creative?
Yeah, so you can run ads on connected TV. So like any of the streaming apps, YouTube, things like that. And you can do it almost like programmatic. So we actually at Bonobos were very early in programmatic advertising, which essentially is a network that you can target specific types of consumers. And so you can do that with connected TV. So like if you're watching Hulu or you're watching Max or even Netflix now has ads, you can run ads on these platforms targeting specific types of consumers. And it's really effective for some brands and when you're at a certain scale, but it is all about the creative. And, you really have to invest in the right creative and test it properly and set up the test properly. I mean, I learned this at Bonobos too. Like the first photo shoot that we did, that was a lifestyle shoot with Ben Watts there. And he loved the imagery so much that he wanted to try a catalog. And let me tell you, never try and retrofit a photo shoot images into a catalog. You have to shoot for a catalog, right? You need to shoot for the channel. And so that was a big learning for us with connected TV is we had some image or some video assets that we sort of recut in a way that we felt like would work for connected TV. And it just didn't because it wasn't optimized for that channel.
How would you optimize something for TV? Give me a sense of what could be great creative.
Yeah, it depends on the brand and the product, right? But I think that when you're introducing a product in a beverage, you need to show people consuming it where they consume it. You need to be a little bit more explicit with the introduction of the product and what the value proposition is. And I think that if you look on our Instagram, like our creative can be much more lifestyle in some sense. And that the video content that we tested was more lifestyle, and it wasn't, to use another term, maybe like direct response enough in the creative. And that's why there are agencies that specialize in storyboarding and shooting this kind of thing. Not that you need to use a big agency, but because I will say, like, particularly on social, a lot of times the thing that's so like crushing for me as someone who, really values great creative is often the worst looking creative and the most lo-fi is what performs the best.
It is destined to be so. Um, and yes, you'll feel like you're betraying yourself to go with that high ROI one. So but that makes sense if you have like more your imagery does feel kind of more subtle and like, simple and cool. Whereas if you think about a lot of TV ads and, like, hey, you got to hit someone over the head with this, they're probably not even paying attention that much, right? So, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so you mentioned also a couple key things that you have to have as an e-com brand, like reviews platform, some other stuff. I wonder, can you just list out some of the vendors that you like for these different areas, or, top people that you feel like you've worked with that you want to shout out? Like, what's your tech stack, or just a few things you would recommend for somebody just getting started? Like, consider these guys or use these guys and, don't even question it.
Yeah. So email, we use Klaviyo, SMS as well. And Yotpo is a reviews platform. I believe a lot of people like Gorgeous as well, as one. Shopify obviously is our e-commerce platform. And we have also had a lot of success with a platform called Fermat, which does helps with optimization of acquisition on ads, and it sort of streamlines the experience. So the consumer doesn't necessarily have to come to your website. It's much fewer clicks, and we've had a lot of success with them. So that's definitely one I would shout out. And yeah, again, I would mention Butter, the tool I mentioned about creative. We are huge fans of Figma. We are just distributed team. And so it's just like I'm in it every single day for cross collaboration, for design and comments, and it makes our lives so much more efficient. And yeah, I mean, I think the subscription to ChatGPT is really worth it. We have trained a GPT for Aplós with all of our recipes and our content, and we use it as a thought partner. Again, you can't really use it as like giving it a prompt and then copying, pasting content and then just using it. It never works that way. It sounds like a AI wrote it. But for generating ideas, or give me 4 cocktail ideas for this type of occasion, if it's already trained on all of our cocktails and we write these really beautiful stories about each cocktail, about when to drink it and the sort of mood and vibe you're in when you want to drink it, it's really great for things like that. So those are the things that I would say are sort of most top of mind for me.
Okay, that's super helpful. I'm sure everybody is Googling any of those ones that they don't know already. And follow up on the SMS versus email. What kind of success do you have with SMS as compared to email? How do you look at it? Do you feel like you're underinvested in SMS or overinvested?
Yeah. I mean, we're really selective with when we use SMS, because I think you can do less frequent communication because people just opt out and unsubscribe. It's really great for timely things and promos or product launches. If you want people to be the first to hear about a product launch, to sign up to your SMS program. And, we use it for order status things, delivery notifications, things like that, and subscription notifications. Those are sort of table stakes for your current customers. But I think for acquiring customers, you can send an email. You could send a lot of emails, particularly in a month like November and December, really email heavy months. But if you're sending an SMS every day or even every other day, or maybe even 2 or 3 times a week, your opt-out rate is going to be very, very high. And so you really just have to test what works for you. So, we're big proponents of creating different segments as well. And with your most engaged people, you can really see who responds to different types of content. So these people only typically respond to promos, but these people love it when we share recipes. So creating segments that identify who's the most likely to engage with the type of content you're sending is really smart, both across email and SMS.
Okay, so David, last question for you. Let's say somebody out there is listening and they're really motivated to start their own e-com brand, but they're not ready to do it yet. What would you say, like, hey, over the next couple of years, just try to learn more about X, Y, and Z, and then you'll be in a really good position to, take whatever technology's out there at that point and build a great brand?
Yeah. I think there's a few things I would say. If you're really young in your career, I do think working for someone else that's kind of a young, hot startup, like a mid-stage startup, probably can be a really valuable experience. I know it was for me. And just surrounding yourself with as many people as possible that you can learn from. Finding a community. There's so many Slack communities, Discord communities. Obviously, there's Startup CPG. Be active in those communities. And then I think the number one thing, if you're young and early in your career, you haven't been in e-com and you want to get into it, I think is really, really immersing yourself in AI tools and becoming a student of that and learning it as much as possible. I listen to the Pivot podcast a lot. My co-founder went to Stern and was a student of Scott Galloway, and he often says AI is not going to take your job. The person who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. And so I think learn as much as you can in that world because it will get you ahead for sure.
And so to learn about AI, I'm one of those people who probably needs to learn about it. So what are the resources that you use other than getting the subscription for Chat GPT and Butter?
I mean, I listen to podcasts like Pivot with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. There are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of tech podcasts. I listen to Hard Fork from the New York Times as well. Listening to those kind of things to really understand what's happening. And then, maybe tapping into things like Brand Innovators, which does conferences across New York and LA and Miami, of brands that are doing really interesting stuff, panels, things like that. And then, media outlets, learning as much as possible from some of the tech outlets. And nowadays it's about finding specific reporters that you really like. A lot of people are doing Substacks or Patreon or things like that. Casey Newton from the Hard Fork New York Times podcasts has his own called Platformer, which is really interesting. I believe it's on Substack. Maybe it's on Patreon. Just Google it and you'll find it. Or we'll put it in the show notes or something. I'll share it with you, Daniel. But yeah, I mean, I think those are the things I would recommend off the top of my head.
That's fantastic. Okay, I hope everybody is jotting those things down and already getting started on their AI journey. I will see you on the road as well. I need to get smart on that area also. Okay, David, my friend, thank you so much. I learned a ton on this podcast episode. I'm sure everybody else did as well. If you want to follow along their journey, it's aplós.world on the web, on Instagram, David Fudge on LinkedIn. And definitely try their product out if you haven't already. You will probably experience the same thing I did, which is just really enjoying the deeply craft experience of getting to try an Aplós. So, David, thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much, Daniel. I really appreciate it. Good to see you. And let's get a drink with Craig in New York soon.
Let's do it. We'll get an Aplós. All right.
Sounds good.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you loved it, I would so appreciate it if you could leave us a review. You could do it right now. If you're an Apple Podcast, you can scroll to the bottom of our Startup CPG podcast page and click on Write a Review. leave your company name in there. I will try to read it out. If you're in Spotify, you can click on About and then the star rating icon. If you are a service provider that would like to appear on the Startup CPG podcast, you can email us at partnerships@startupcpg.com. Lastly, if you found yourself grooving along to the music, it is my band. You can visit our website and listen to more. It is superfantastics.com. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.